Have you ever looked out the window during a long highway drive and just seen those massive, towering wind turbines?
Oh, yeah, spinning out there in the distance.
Right. And have you ever wondered who actually builds those?
And, we don't mean who manufactures the fiberglass blades in some factory.
Who physically alters the geography, prepares the earth, pours those colossal concrete foundations, and perfectly orchestrates the logistics to erect them in the middle of a remote field?
It's a huge undertaking.
It really is. Well, today we are starting with a rather baffling question for you to consider. How does a single construction firm end up building roughly 90% of an entire state's wind farms?
Which honestly sounds like a statistical typo.
Right.
Especially when you are talking about a state as geographically large and, frankly, highly regulated as New York.
Oh, absolutely.
But that number is very real. And the mechanics of how a company captures that kind of market share is what we are looking at today.
So, welcome to our deep dive.
Uh-huh.
Today, our source material is an incredibly detailed article by Joanne E. McFadden.
It's a great piece.
It really is. It tracks the rapid rise of the Wesson Group, which is this infrastructure heavyweight based out of Johnstown, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the hidden, often overlooked mechanics of modern infrastructure.
And that massive renewable energy transition happening right under our noses.
Yes, because when you really parse through this source material, you realize you aren't just reading a story about moving dirt and pouring concrete.
Not at all. It is actually a masterclass in how businesses anticipate sweeping economic and technological shifts.
Yeah, and then surgically position themselves to be the single bottleneck for an entire industry's growth.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how they cornered the market on these heavy civil mega projects, we have to look at their beginnings.
Which were surprisingly recent, actually.
Very recent. The company was founded in 2013 by Chief Operating Officer Scott Lewis, who is a professional engineer, along with a group of colleagues.
Right.
And almost immediately, they had to prove they could move faster than the industry standard.
And we should probably clarify for the listener what we mean when we say heavy civil construction.
Oh, good point.
Because it isn't, building a residential subdivision or remodeling a commercial office space.
No, not at all.
Heavy civil means you are fundamentally altering the landscape. You are moving literal mountains of earth.
Carving out new drainage systems.
Exactly. Carving out drainage, pouring subterranean foundations the size of Olympic swimming pools.
And traditionally, that kind of work moves at an absolutely glacial pace.
It does. But early on, Wesson developed a reputation for beating the clock.
Yeah, the source gives two really striking examples of that efficiency. First, they handled the Adirondack Welcome Center in Queensbury, right off I-87 North.
Right. They finished that in 2018.
Yep. Now, they faced significant design revisions during that build. And look, anyone who has ever managed a project knows that design revisions usually trigger a cascade of change orders.
Oh, massive budget bloat.
Months of delays. But Wesson somehow pushed through those revisions and completed the Welcome Center not just on budget, but ahead of schedule.
Which is impressive. But the project that really highlights their operational speed happened 2 years prior, in 2016.
At the New York State Fairground.
In Syracuse, yes. They were contracted to install 315 recreational vehicle spaces and build out an additional midway space. And they had an uncompromising window of just 83 days to finish the entire job.
83 days. I've had contractors take longer than that just to source the tile for a bathroom remodel.
Right.
Doing heavy civil work for hundreds of RVs in under 3 months seems nearly impossible.
What's fascinating here is the sheer logistical density required to pull that off.
What do you mean by density in this context?
Well, think about what 315 RV spaces actually entails. You aren't just paving a parking lot.
Oh, right.
Every single one of those spaces needs individual water hookups, localized sewer connections, and heavy-duty electrical panels.
Because they're running air conditioning.
Exactly. Panels capable of handling 315 air conditioning units running simultaneously in the August heat.
That is a lot of power.
It's massive. You have dozens of trenching crews, electricians, and heavy machinery operators working basically on top of each other.
Wow.
And you cannot miss the deadline because the governor is going to cut the ribbon on opening day of the state fair, regardless of whether you are finished or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you can manage that level of high-stakes, hyper-compressed logistical chaos, you are essentially training your workforce for for the incredibly complex energy projects that were just starting to loom on the horizon.
That intense logistical mastery really became their calling card, and they were going to need every ounce of that coordination for what came next.
Because that horizon arrived fast. Source material notes that right around that same time, in 2016, Wesson made a massive pivot.
A huge shift.
They took on the Copenhagen Wind Farm across Lewis and Jefferson counties and the Jericho Rise Wind Farm in Franklin County.
Yeah, that was the start of a massive wave.
And today, renewables make up a staggering 80% of Wesson's total contracts.
That is a fundamental reallocation of their entire business model. They transformed the profile of their company in just a few short years to chase this specific market.
Which brings us back to that statistic I mentioned at the top of the show. I actually had to read this twice to make sure I was interpreting it correctly.
The 90% figure.
Yes. Wesson has constructed roughly 90% of the wind farms in New York State. But here is the critical second half of that equation. The power generated by 98% of those wind farms is purchased by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA.
And that second statistic is the absolute key to understanding the first. To see how one company captures 90% of a statewide market, you have to look at the business risk.
Oh, the lack of it.
Exactly, the lack of it. Wesson stepped into a market where the financial risk had been almost completely neutralized for their clients.
How so? Just because the state wants renewable energy doesn't mean it's easy to fund a $100 million construction site.
True, but look at the environment. First, construction prices in the wind power sector were dropping while turbine efficiency was skyrocketing.
Okay, so the tech is getting cheaper and better.
Right. At the same time, New York State mandated ambitious targets. Impartially reporting the numbers here, they set a goal of 70% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% by 2050.
Those are huge mandates.
They are, and to hit those mandates, the state offered major incentives to developers. But the real linchpin is NYSERDA.
Because they buy the power.
Yes. When NYSERDA guarantees they will buy 98% of the power generated, it acts like a massive power purchase agreement.
Oh, I see.
For a wind farm developer, having a state-backed, guaranteed buyer means the banks will happily lend you the capital to build.
So Wesson wasn't just finding a busy market. They found a market where their clients had rock-solid, guaranteed funding. The money to pay the construction firm was never in doubt.
Exactly. You have high state-level demand, dropping physical costs, and a guaranteed end customer.
The perfect storm.
Wesson looked at that equation, realized that the only bottleneck was finding a heavy civil contractor capable of actually moving the dirt and pouring the concrete fast enough.
And they positioned themselves to be that exact bottleneck.
You got it.
And what I appreciate about this source is that it grounds these massive multi-billion-dollar state mandates in a very human reality. The article details Wesson constructing several large wind farms right along the Canadian border. And the team notes that this region is particularly suited for wind development, not just because of the weather, but because of the local agriculture.
The intersection of new energy and traditional farming is really vital here. Dairy and crop farmers often operate on razor-thin margins.
Very true.
Leasing a fraction of their land for these giant wind turbines provides a crucial, predictable economic lifeline.
Because it pays out no matter what.
Exactly. It creates a steady revenue stream that operates independently of crop yields or milk prices, which is helping families keep their historic, multi-generational farms operational.
It's a fascinating dual use of the land. But Wesson isn't just focusing on wind. Their energy footprint is expanding rapidly.
Very rapidly.
Right now, they are actively managing 3 utility-scale solar projects across New York. And more importantly, they are doing the heavy lifting to actually connect these decentralized power sources to the wider world.
Right, the transmission side of things.
Yeah, they engineer, procure, and construct highly complex transmission lines. They also build the vital substations that serve as the intermediary between the farm and the grid.
Because generating a megawatt of solar power in a remote field is useless if you can't transport it.
Exactly.
They build those substations to step up the medium voltage electricity coming off the solar panels into extreme high voltage.
Why does it need to be so high?
Well, transmitting power across the massive geography of New York State requires those high voltages to prevent the electricity from simply dissipating as heat along the lines.
Ah, that makes sense.
But building the infrastructure to handle that kind of raw, high-voltage load requires incredibly specialized engineering and safety protocols.
And speaking of specialized engineering, here's where it gets really interesting.
I love this part.
We've been talking about massive, sprawling spaces like wind farms and rural transmission lines, but Wesson's logistical control is just as critical in microscopic environments.
Yeah.
The source details their work at the Albany Nanotech Complex. They came in as a subcontractor, and their job was to relocate existing utilities, sewer, water, and gas, and install new utilities for a brand new manufacturing building.
And this is where we really have to connect the dots for you listening. Moving a sewer or a water line sounds like standard, everyday construction work.
Sure does.
But doing it underneath a nanotechnology complex is an entirely different discipline. The source points out that prior to founding Wesson, the company's partners had years of experience working together on infrastructure projects, specifically for semiconductor chip fabrication facilities.
Which feels like an incredibly niche background for a heavy civil firm.
It is, and it made them uniquely qualified for the Albany Nanotech job. You have to understand the stakes of handling heavy utilities around hypersensitive microchip facilities.
Because of the vibrations.
Yes, you are operating massive earth-moving equipment in an environment where microscopic ground vibrations, a tiny drop in municipal water pressure, or even a minor dust contamination could misalign a photolithography machine.
Oh, wow.
And that would ruin millions of dollars of semiconductor wafers. It is high-stakes, surgical civil engineering.
Surgical civil engineering. I like that. And they are taking that high-tech adjacent experience and using it to try and future-proof the grid.
Right.
Because renewable energy has a very well-known problem. The sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing.
The intermittency issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To combat this, Wesson is currently conducting research and testing on battery storage facilities. The goal is to capture and save the energy generated during off-peak times, say a windy Tuesday night.
So it can be discharged onto the grid when demand spikes on a hot Thursday afternoon.
Yes.
It's the holy grail of renewable infrastructure. And Wesson is uniquely positioned to tackle this because of their geographic proximity to both the Albany Nanotech facility and Global Foundries.
Yeah.
They are taking their heavy civil capabilities, combining it with their dominance in renewable energy construction, and cross-pollinating all of that with the high-tech semiconductor ecosystem right in their backyard.
Which brings us to the sheer scale of what this company is attempting to manage concurrently.
It's staggering.
The article states that the average Wesson project is around $100 million. But here's the detail that made me pause. As of last year, they were already booking jobs through the year 2028.
Wait, 2028? How does a construction firm bid on a job today, trying to calculate the cost of concrete, steel, and labor for a project where the first shovel won't hit the dirt for another 4 years?
That's exactly where the development timeline comes in, and it completely recontextualizes what their daily operations look like.
How so?
According to the source, a single project of this magnitude takes between 6 and 8 years to be developed from conception to finish. They aren't just quoting material prices, they are deeply involved in that entire half-decade run-up.
That makes sense. Over an 8-year span, they're likely navigating the initial design, local zoning permitting, endless environmental and engineering reviews.
State compliance filings.
Yes, geotechnical surveys of the soil, constructability reviews, and then finally the actual construction phase.
And to prove they aren't completely siloed into just energy and tech, they maintain a very diverse public works portfolio.
Right.
For instance, they completed the Maybrook Trailway. This was a massive public project converting old, abandoned railroad tracks into a 23-mile paved bike path stretching across Putnam and Dutchess counties.
Which is a huge undertaking.
And it wasn't just laying down asphalt. It involved rehabilitating or entirely replacing over 30 different structural elements, like old bridges and culverts, all along the route.
And similarly, they tackled the New York State Department of Transportation Ulster Bundled Bridges project.
The bundled bridges, yeah.
This involved replacing 6 critical bridges. But what makes it notable is that they had to execute the demolition and reconstruction while navigating highly complex wildlife conservation rules.
Oh, like what?
For example, in many of these state projects, you are legally prohibited from pouring concrete or driving piles if a specific endangered species of turtle or bird is in its nesting season.
Seriously.
Yes. It requires a firm that can handle intense regulatory and environmental red tape alongside the heavy lifting.
So how does a single company manage to coordinate all of this? Turbines on the Canadian border, microchips in Albany, bridges in Ulster County, across a state as massive as New York.
It comes down to where they are.
The source points heavily to their strategic geography. They're headquartered in Johnstown, which is in Fulton County.
In logistics, geography is destiny. Being based in Fulton County places them right on the New York State Thruway, which is the main artery connecting the Hudson Valley to western New York.
Yep.
But more importantly, the Thruway intersects with major north-south corridors: I-87, I-81, State Route 12, I-86, and I-390.
That is a lot of access.
That specific web of highways provides them unparalleled direct access to where their clients are located across New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. They can deploy heavy equipment anywhere in the region without navigating secondary roads.
It's the perfect staging ground, and they are leaning into that location even more.
Yeah, the new facility.
Discussing current events from the article, Wesson is planning a major 2026 expansion to a brand new facility at the Crossroads Business Park right there in Johnstown.
And the way they are funding this expansion highlights their administrative savvy. They worked closely with the Fulton County Center for Regional Growth to submit a New York State Consolidated Funding Application, or a CFA.
The article briefly touches on the CFA, noting that it allows an applicant to be considered for multiple funding sources with just one single application.
Right. Instead of applying to 50 different state agencies for grants, tax breaks, and regional development funds,
Which usually takes forever.
and requires an army of lawyers and accountants, New York created a single portal. Leveraging that regional economic development tool to subsidize the expansion of your own corporate infrastructure is a very smart, highly efficient business move.
Absolutely.
And notably, this new facility will include a dedicated in-house training center. When you are dealing with $100 million projects, massive earth-moving equipment, and extreme high-voltage systems, safety is paramount.
You can't take risks with that stuff.
A dedicated training facility ensures they can rapidly scale their workforce without diluting their safety standards.
And speaking of that workforce, let's transition to the company's culture, because the article makes it clear that their growth strategy relies on a lot more than just moving dirt and stringing wires.
Very true.
In 2025, they had about 300 full-time positions, and they expect that number to keep growing, especially during the warmer months when the construction season peaks. But the interesting part is how they hire. They recruit locally across a really diverse range of roles, everything from civil engineers and accountants to heavy equipment operators and general laborers.
We should look at the underlying business mechanics of why they do that. Yes, it creates a sustainable local ecosystem, but it is also a highly effective permitting strategy.
How so?
Well, when a company is executing a $100 million infrastructure project, they are inherently disrupting the community they're working in. There is constant noise, heavy truck traffic destroying local roads, and massive land alteration.
People usually don't love that.
Exactly. The local town boards that have to approve these multi-year construction permits hate that disruption. But if the company asking for the permit is actively hiring local labor and boosting the local economy, those town boards are much more likely to approve variances and work with the developers.
That is a great point. The community integration isn't just an afterthought. It's a critical part of operating in these municipalities.
Yes.
And they are very deliberate about who they bring on. 10% of their workforce are veterans, and the company actively contributes to causes supporting the military. In fact, that community focus has its own dedicated branch, the Wesson Group Cares philanthropic program.
Having a philanthropic arm that accepts proposals year-round is a tangible way to balance the physical disruption of their projects with genuine community investment. It earns them the social license to operate.
And the list of their local impacts is incredibly varied. They've donated to food pantries, partnered with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and even provided the labor and materials to help build a new soup kitchen right in their hometown of Johnstown.
That's fantastic.
They sponsor youth sports, contribute to the Mountain Valley Hospice, and even sponsored Gloversville's legacy baseball facility, Parkhurst Field.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a specific anecdote in the source that proves this isn't just a corporate PR strategy written in a boardroom.
Oh, about the wind farm.
Yes. When Wesson employees were on the ground building the Barron Winds Farm down in Carhockton, New York, they didn't just clock out at 5 p.m. and isolate themselves in a hotel.
What do they do?
Those employees actually volunteered their off hours working on restoration projects for the local historical society and the Loon Lake Preserve.
Wow.
That demonstrates a culture where the workers themselves are genuinely invested in the physical communities they are temporarily inhabiting.
It really is a powerful way to conduct business. The article includes a guiding quote from a team member that I think sums up their entire operational ethos perfectly.
Let's hear it.
They said, "We want to leave each community we touch better than we found it. We build projects that better people's way of life and do it in a manner that we better the community.
It is a strong philosophy, and clearly, given their immense growth, their ability to beat 83-day deadlines, and their near-total market dominance in the wind sector, it is a philosophy that clients and municipalities are eager to partner with.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, the next time you flip on a light switch that happens to be powered by a distant wind turbine.
Or the next time you spend a Saturday riding your bike down a beautiful 23-mile converted railway trail.
Exactly. Remember what it took to build it. There is a massive multi-year puzzle of surgical engineering, high-stakes logistics, and deep community partnership happening behind the scenes to make modern life possible.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own. We discussed how these massive, heavy civil projects take 6 to 8 years to develop from conception to the finished product. That means the power grids, the wind farms, and the transportation systems being completed today were actually designed, permitted, and planned for the world of nearly a decade ago.
That is wild to think about.
As renewable technology, battery storage capacity, and microchip manufacturing evolve at an unprecedented, lightning-fast pace, how will this massive, inherently slow-moving construction industry adapt? How do they ensure that the 6 to 8 year mega projects being planned tomorrow aren't technologically obsolete by the time the very first shovel finally hits the dirt?
That is a fascinating question to ponder, and it really puts the pace of innovation into perspective. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking closely at the infrastructure around you, and as always, keep questioning the world. We'll catch you next time.